Hell is that old way of perceiving. How can one make the earthly world into hell? Reject some of life. Condemn it. Condemning reality is hell. Rejecting God, not the word God, but what is symbolized by the word, is hell. Rejecting God is hell. The only sin that cannot be redeemed is the rejection of the Holy Spirit, of reality, of language. That sin can only be continued or discontinued. It cannot be redeemed. It cannot be made up for through some other charitable act. No one can do some charity work to compensate for rejecting God, for rejecting heaven, for rejecting spirituality, for rejecting introspection. Charity work is fine, but if one does charity work and yet persists in condemning God and rejecting the divinity which they are, then the charitable activity will have no effect in regard to perpetuating the process of rejecting heaven, rejecting spirituality, rejecting introspection, and rejecting language. So how does one create hell? First, create an idea of how life should be, such as an idea that is frightening or disturbing to you. Well, that would be actually an idea of how life should not be. So first create an idea of how life should be, and then notice that there's other things besides how life should be. Those are obviously how life should not be. And some of those things about how life should not be, those could be disturbing or frightening. And make note of that stuff. Then reject the fear itself. Reject the disturbance itself. Pretend that you have never experienced fear, and that other people should not experience fear either. They shouldn't be afraid of you. They shouldn't be afraid of hurricanes. They shouldn't be afraid of cars traveling at high speed through intersections in the wrong direction or whatever, unexpectedly. People should not ever experience fear. I have never experienced fear myself, and no one else ever should. Finally, condemn others for displaying any possible sign of fear. This is how to make life hell. Okay? Condemn others for displaying any possible sign of fear. That's negative. They shouldn't be so negative. If someone fails to condemn fear in general, then condemn them for not condemning fear, for not hysterically fearing fear itself. Even if a newborn child shows fear, punish them with a spanking. I don't care if they're 2 weeks old. That's not too young. Spank them. Or restrict their access to nourishment. That can be quite effective. That's how to create hell. Anytime a newborn child, or any age child, or any age adult, anyone ever shows fear, well, they shouldn't do that. Fear should not exist. So punish anyone who shows fear. That's how to create hell. Teach them shame. They must learn to be ashamed of fear. They must pretend not to experience fear. They must learn to convincingly hide it. It must look sincere. They must be terrified of displaying fear. Their spirits must be broken. Their pretense must be sincere. They must believe it. They must believe that they are not experiencing fear even when they are experiencing fear. They must deny it. They must be numb to it. They must not be sensitive to danger. They must be ashamed of caution. They must be afraid of appearing too conservative in public. Will God punish them if they admit to experiencing fear? Will they be tortured in the Holy Roman Empire's latest phase of the Inquisition? Will they be executed in a ritual human sacrifice? Of course, after due process of law. Will they be placed in a mental hospital and drugged into stupor without their consent? Will they be betrayed and then whipped and crucified like a messianic martyr? And of course, they'll have to carry their cross as well. So what social institution teaches us to fear? What social institution teaches us shame? It's called religion. Should we condemn the actual function of religion? Should we insist that religion should be some specific thing in particular? With our attachment to that presumption, then blinding us to the reality of what religion is in actuality. Should we say religion should not be so frightening? Should we say anything that frightens us should not be, including religion? Yes, that's exactly what we should say. We should condemn religion and reject reality and criticize God's injustice, his erroneous injustice in victimizing us by convincing us that life should not be hell, but is. It's God's fault. That's why I don't like God. We should ignore the obvious reality of what words are. Language should not be used to influence the intention and perception of other people. In fact, language should not exist. There is no such thing as reverse psychology. The love of irony is not the root of all evil, but it should be. Reverse psychology should exist, but it should not be so effective. On the other hand, reverse psychology should not exist, and so it cannot. Shame is the only real problem. We must save the world from it. Also, blame is the only real problem. We must save heaven from blame, or else hell will be victorious over heaven and will be all your fault personally. In that case, you will be guilty as hell. But not yet. It would be wrong to manipulate you right now by threatening future social rejection. So instead, bribery is better. If you are a good child, or a good adult, or a good citizen, or a good employee, then Santa Claus will let you into heaven when you die. Obviously, you could not be in heaven already, or else the whole scheme of bribing you with a future promise of salvation in heaven would be slightly less effective. Now, you are definitely in hell, but you should not be. You should struggle to get out of hell and to get into heaven. Fortunately, I know the only way out of heaven. Oh, sorry, I made a mistake. I apologize. I know the only way out of hell and into heaven, and that's very unfortunate for someone like you who's in hell and needs to get out and should struggle to get out of hell and get into heaven. Well, because I know the only way, that is why you should obviously do whatever I tell you. First, you must learn what is evil so you can condemn it, especially reverse psychology, which does not even exist in the first place and should not only be rejected, but ridiculed as preposterous and disturbing and insane and much too ironic. This has been the perception of earth, heaven, and hell.